I've had this theory about Famicom game prices for a while, and Chitei Senkou Bazolder leans right into it. Basically, if a Famicom cartridge has a picture of a woman on the cover, you can double the price. It doesn't matter how awful the game is, certain people just gravitate to that art. And in the case of Bazolder, as it is a very late Famicom action game, doubling that price makes it very expensive. It would have been a 10,000 yen club member without it, and these days I've seen it around for 20,000 yen, but the only copy for sale while I was recording this was asking around 55,000 yen. Yeah, prices on the high-end Famicom stuff have gone a bit nuts since I started recording Famidaily. Bazolder is a cinematic action-adventure game. It has 4 completely different game modes that are used to assemble its tale. Unfortunately, none of the game modes work quite as well as you'd like. If this style of game sounds familiar to you, that's because Bazolder was designed by Yoshikawa Shoichi, who also designed the original Golgo 13 game on the Famicom, which had a very similar concept of mashing up a whole bunch of different styles of game. The plot in Bazolder is that the UN has been building underground exploration vehicles, and those explorers have been vanishing. They launch Bazolder Unit 5 to find out what happened, and on board is Moby, a woman whose lover and father were both on the missing Bazolder Unit 4. And of course over the game they find an underground empire that's plotting to take over the surface. The 4 different play modes here are side-scrolling shooter, vertically scrolling shooter, first-person boss fights, and side-scrolling platforming exploration. There really aren't any power-ups in any of the modes, just items that occasionally drop from enemies to recover some depleted resource. The shooting sections have you driving the Bazolder, which has multiple modes that you can transform into. For both styles of shooting stages, pressing B fires your gun, and holding down A is used to transform or switch equipment. In the horizontal scrolling mode, you start out in a tank. The tank can fire 2 small bullets which always travel horizontally and upward at an angle. Even when you're on a slope, that's how they fire. If you hold down A and press right, you'll switch to drill mode, and that can tunnel through solid rock. Using the drill costs a bit of fuel, which has to be recovered from enemies. Eventually you'll encounter a hole you can't get over, so while change is highlighted in the status bar, you hold down A and press up. That will transform you into hover mode, which constantly burns fuel. It also doesn't look a whole lot different from the tank. In hover mode, you can freely fly around the screen, and its default gun is a 3-way shot. After you progress in the story a bit, you can hold down A and press up one more time to transform into fighter mode. The default weapon there is a bouncing laser. As you progress through the game, additional weapons will become available for each of these vehicle modes, though honestly, they're all pretty awful. Well, except this one that shoots a bunch of balls out that home in on targets. But for the other ones, you're better off using your default gun. The alternate weapons function differently in the vertically scrolling segments. This weapon drops mines in the horizontal scrolling sections, but in vertical it fires around your ship. In the vertical segments, you have to use either the hover mode or the fighter mode, and so fuel is constantly draining during them. Hover mode is still capable of drilling through surfaces, so you have to use that when you run into a wall. The flying modes can collide with terrain, and that damages your shield. The shield recovers with time, but sometimes you're just under continual attack and don't really get a chance to recharge. You only have 1 life in Bazolder, so as soon as that shield runs out, it's game over. At least you have infinite continues, and you get passwords that will let you pick up at the start of the chapter. The tank doesn't have any maneuverability, and as a result, that very first stage is the hardest stage in the game. You're going to have a really tough time dodging attacks as you learn this one. And your bullets don't pass through terrain, while enemies and their shots do. Eventually you'll run into a first-person boss fight, and these break down into 2 segments. First, you talk to the crew of the Bazolder and get their views on what you should do, as well as have the opportunity to change your equipment. Your real goal here is to bring up chance to 100%. And you can do that by talking to the correct people in the correct order, or by taking out certain attacks from the enemy. After you talk to people a few times, it'll switch up to an action mode, and here you hit A and B to fire your gun. Enemies might be vulnerable at only certain points, or with only certain kinds of weapons, and they'll often have attacks that you'll have to shoot down before they get you. Once the chance reaches 100%, it only takes one shot to beat them. Finally, we have the platforming maze segments. And here Moby is exploring outside of the Bazolder, looking for items, possibly other crew members who have been lost. You can drop through the holes in these segments to get to other areas of the maze, and if you find a door like this, you have to find the right item or person to allow you to pass through it. You have a separate bar for your gun and your health. Pressing B will fire and A will jump, while pressing up will do a kick. The kick does so little damage though, that you really shouldn't use it because you're just going to get hurt if you do. At the end of the mazes, there's always a boss, and the boss is always the exact same, and very easy. They just bounce around the screen for a few moments, and run away with only a few shots. There are 5 chapters in Bazolder, and they don't all play in quite the same order with these style of levels. In Japan, this is considered to be one of the hidden gems of the Famicom, and Moby seems to have quite a few fans. The game is especially known for its odd script, which had strange lines like, "It might be hot in these caverns, but if you keep staring at a girl, you'll be the one who gets burned." And Moby suddenly breaking into English with, "Never give up." My take on Bazolder is that it's an interesting mess. None of the segments really work quite as well as you'd like them to. The shoot-em-ups are slow and clunky. It's too difficult to hit anything in the first-person boss fights. And the action in the platforming maze sections is awkward. They're all really second-tier stuff. But it is interesting how it mashes all those styles together. How the game tries to use them to build a huge epic story. Bazolder is a game that conceptually is kind of neat, but then once you're done playing it, you really don't want to go back to it.